So, you want to beat Chapter 8 in ARCHERO? Well, you've come to the right place. In this video, you'll learn the best weapon, gear and hero, the best abilities, and how to beat every boss and monster, all for Chapter 8. My name is Teeds and I make many ARCHERO videos from guides, tier lists, updates, news and more. Please do subscribe and click the bell for more ARCHERO content. I'd like to preface this by saying this Chapter 8 guide is based on my experience, research, playstyle, and opinion. Not everyone's playstyle is the same, so you're more than welcome to leave your own tips in the comments down below. It's taken me roughly a month to beat Chapter 8, however probably 10 serious runs in total, as my other runs were just for testing new characters and abilities for various other videos. I actually didn't find it super challenging. It's pretty simple once you understand how some of the monsters and bosses work. I've completed Chapter 8 twice. First, the best weapons, gear, and heroes for Chapter 8. This was my gear before I started Chapter 8. This is my gear now after completing Chapter 8. My gear hasn't changed much. I've only purchased 4 chapter packs in the past to support the game. I wasn't very lucky with my purchased chest openings. I haven't purchased any gems or chapter packs since Chapter 4. Everything you see here is from free chest and farmed. As you can see, you do not need a perfect epic to complete Chapter 8. The weapon I would recommend using for Chapter 8 is the epic Death Scythe. The Death Scythe is one of the strongest weapons in ARCHERO. The strong knockback is much needed for the enemies you have to go against, and the built-in headshot is very powerful here. Another weapon that some users have recommended is the Tornado, and that's because of one boss, which we will get to. I do not recommend the Tornado for this chapter, due to the no knockback effect. A strong knockback is very powerful for this chapter, and the Tornado, while it's strong in damage, it's weak in crowd control. For armor, gear, and pets, I recommend the Vest of Dexterity paired up with 2 Serpent Rings for the increased dodge chance effect. Dodge, in my opinion, is a very powerful stat as it increases your chance to completely dodge a whole attack, and in Chapter 8, you'll be taking a ton of damage. For pets, I recommend the Laser Bats or the Elf. The Laser Bats attack fast and are able to go through obstacles, while the Elf also attacks pretty fast and can push back monsters. The Elf's pushback is pretty nice if you're using a weapon with a low knockback. I opted for the 2 Laser Bats as I was running the Death Scythe for Chapter 8. If you do not have any of the recommended weapons, gear, pets, and so on, or you just have other personal favorites, don't worry. You can still beat the chapter, but I found that it was a lot easier beating the chapter with what I recommended here. For heroes, I used Furin. He has high damage per second and is also available for both free-to-play players and paying players. Another hero I can recommend for paying players is Onya. I used him in my second playthrough in beating Chapter 8 and he is pretty strong. Next, the best abilities. Abilities can make or break your run. Despite having the best gear, weapon, or even a very strong hero, your abilities make a massive difference, and they can increase or decrease the chances of success for that particular run. The best abilities, in my opinion, for Chapter 8 specifically: God tier, we have Extra Life, Multi-Shot, Rage, Ricochet, and Front Arrow. SS tier, we have Wingman, Slow Projectile, Invincibility, Dodge, and Agility. In S tier, we have Major Attack Boost, HP Boost, Bloodthirst, Piercing paired up with Diagonal Arrows and Bouncy Wall. And in A tier, we have Major Attack Speed Boost, Crit Master, Headshot, Shield Guard, Fire Strike, Toxic Strike, and Bolt Strike. These abilities are, in my opinion, the best. A few questions you may have. Bloodthirst is pretty high in my book because you are able to heal off spawned minions, and there are a lot of them in Chapter 8. While this ability is useless in most boss fights, I found that the monsters you had to deal with were a lot harder than the bosses themselves. If you don't have that issue, you can ignore this ability, but in conclusion, this ability is important if you're having trouble reaching the bosses. Crit Master is lower because I don't value crit on my Death Scythe as much. That's because personally I like consistent numbers over chance numbers. However, if you're running an epic Brave Bow, I recommend picking up Crit Master where you can because of the increased crit damage. If you're running Tornado, do not pick up Ricochet, Pierce, and Bouncy Wall. If you're interested in understanding why, I have a video that I will link in the description box below. If you're running Death Scythe, I don't recommend Bouncy Wall. Because of the strong knockback on the Death Scythe, Bouncy Wall can actually push monsters towards you. I've taken damage and died many times to this. That's it generally for the abilities I recommend for Chapter 8. Remember, depending on your playstyle, you may value other abilities over the ones I've shared with you. Here are the abilities that I completed the chapter with for the first time. It was with Furin and I used no revives. Lastly, how to beat the bosses and monsters. Before we get into it, a few pointers. Chapter 8 is very projectile heavy. Because of this, I highly recommend watching your character when there are a lot of projectile throwing monsters. Watching your character makes it much easier to react to incoming projectiles. If you watch the monster or projectile, you're more likely to take damage. This chapter is very heavily reliant on abilities. It comes to the point where you can't really upgrade your armor as easily as before. It will be a long time until I can upgrade my items to a perfect epic, so this chapter will always be challenging for me until then. Make sure you're making use of stutter step. I know that some players use this method of stutter stepping where they stand still. I actually found that stutter stepping to the left, right, up or down is much better suited for the chapter due to the many projectiles you will have to avoid. Stutter stepping in this method takes off some of the stress of having to consciously avoid attacks. You do not need to see the monster on your map. It's better to be as far away as possible from them, only move up if your attacks are not hitting them. While these tips will help you in completing Chapter 8, it won't always help you beat it the first time after watching this video. You have to practice. It's not a race, just keep practicing. This game is hard and it still requires eye coordination and skill. I will be guiding you through this with a gameplay. However, I will be putting tips for each monster in this chapter on the sides of the gameplay here. Feel free to pause if you need specific in-depth help with that monster. Entering level 1 here, we have the red blob that splits into 2 blobs, and we have the bees. The bees are very easy to deal with, they are new monsters in Chapter 8, and they just hover slowly towards you. Now we have the plants here. The plants you should also be familiar with. They fire 2 red projectiles at you, and one is kind of off, but one is directly aimed for you. Just going to pick an ability here. We're going to pick up Rage. Rage is really good for this chapter. We have the flowers again, the bats. So the bats are also something you should be familiar with. They all tend to dash at the same time as well. So I would tend not to move around too much, otherwise it can be a little bit more confusing. Here we're going to pick up Shield Guard. And now we're done with more bees, but going back to the red blobs here. So the red blobs split into 2 blue blobs. I actually found them probably the most difficult enemies to deal with early on. Because they dart a lot and they're very, very fast, I try to keep my distance from them. So try not to be too close to them. Here we have the walking spraying plants. So these plants don't directly aim at you. They fire 3 projectiles and it's always right, left and middle. The middle one is always generally towards you, but these are they're just trying to make it harder for you to move around. So as you can see, when they're firing all together, it can be a bit more confusing, but watching your character will generally help in this case. We have a lot of the walking plants here, so we're dealing with more of them. They're honestly pretty easy in my opinion. The projectiles are not too fast, so I didn't have much trouble with them. But I actually didn't catch it there. We're going to pick up Headshot here. Epic Death Swipe with more Headshot is really nice. Here we have the same enemies, not too bad. We're coming into our first boss here. We'll see which boss this is. So here we have, so we have the orb pig or the purple electric pig. So every time he fires the orbs, just run closer to the orbs. I kind of messed up here a little bit. I probably will insert a different gameplay just to show you that it's not as bad as I'm making it look. But every time he fires the orbs, I tend to run towards them. If they're boxed out like that, I try to distance myself from them, but usually it's better to just run towards the orb, and then when the orb is bouncing back, run back towards the orb. Okay, here we have the big blue blobs. So the big blue blobs spawn smaller blue blobs, which also I would try and stay as far away as possible from the small ones because they do dash. The big blobs themselves aren't very threatening at all. They don't chase you. They don't directly aim at you either. Sometimes it can feel like they are, but they're definitely not. And they take a lot of damage, so they are a bit tanky. I would try and kill the big blobs as fast as possible because if you don't have a lot of damage or you have bad RNG, they are very hard to deal with because then you are letting the little blue blobs here stack up and spawn. So it's very, very critical that you have good RNG for this, because if you have bad abilities or if you have low damage, it can be really hard. But in general, just try and focus the big blue blobs first. You want to take them out as quickly as possible. And Ricochet tends to help a lot with the big blue blobs. Sorry, it's kind of like a tongue twister. Anyway, we just have more of the plant shooting monsters and the little blobs, so it's not too bad. I find that that this chapter gets really hard in the later stages. Here we have the rock throwers. So the rock throwers always fire 5 projectiles, and the middle projectile is always aimed directly at you. I would try and take them out as fast as possible because they really limit your movement and they really zone out a lot of areas. So while the middle rock is being thrown at you, the other 4 are trying to zone you out. And these are the scarecrows. So with the scarecrows, as you can see here, I just try to move up and down slightly, just up and down slightly. They're not too hard. They do fire 8 curved counterclockwise projectiles, but only 1 of them or maybe 2 would be trying to hit you or will be in your general area. So it's not too bad. So the knockback here is really strong and really nice because they push them very easily. Okay, so here we have more of them. The nice thing about the scarecrows projectiles is that they're absorbed by walls, so you can use walls to your advantage here. So as you can see, they're not that threatening at all. They can be a bit hard when there are a lot more projectiles on the map, but on their own, they're not that bad. We're up to the second boss here. It's just a scarecrow boss. So it's just very similar to the chapter 7 boss if you have fought that boss before. He throws out 1 pumpkin that spins around and throws projectiles at you, and he throws projectiles himself. I try not to move around too much. I tend to stay on the one side of the map and then just move slightly to the right, to the left, move up or down, and that's pretty much it. It's very, very simple. It takes a lot of practice, especially if you skipped him in chapter 7. I actually had a lot of practice with him in chapter 7. I didn't skip him, so I actually found him pretty easy. But generally, just up and down. So these guys are actually the hardest monsters for me. These are the bomb throwing ghost bombers. They're not too bad when there's no obstacles on the map, but when you have a lot more monsters and a lot more projectiles on the map, they can be very, very hard. What I tend to do with the blue ghost bombers is to just pause very, very briefly and then move, pause very briefly and then move. You want to pause in between shots. I will show you more examples of this because I found them very difficult, but we'll see an example probably in this gameplay here. So here we have the trees. Just a little note, I usually try, in this case it was fine, but I usually try to focus those plants that you just saw before behind the fences. Those plants can make it very difficult to move around, especially because they are hiding behind obstacles. So I try to take them out first when I can. And here we just have, like before as well, we have these wolves. The wolves are probably enemies that you've fought before. They're very simple. They just dash towards you. I tend to not focus them too much because I think the projectiles are more harder. Now with the archers here can make it very hard too. But what I do is when you see that red line, I usually just stay in that spot until the red line is gone and then I move to a new location. That makes it much easier. You don't want the red line to follow you and you don't want to do big movements. So here you can see a lot of arrows. I just pause in that spot, wait for the red line to disappear, and then I move to the location where I saw there was no red lines. That's pretty much it. Remember, watching your character is the best bet you've got here. As you can see, there are so many projectiles. You just want to watch your character and move on. And going back to the tree, sorry, it's so fast. My gameplay is very, very fast, so I'm trying to keep up with it, but I hopefully the tips and stuff will leave on the side are much easier for you. But the tree stumps, they fire 8 projectiles in all directions and they don't generally aim at you. You just have to try and stay out of the area. It's just more of a zoning out kind of thing. This chapter has a lot of zoning out. Okay, here we're reaching the 3rd boss. Just going to pick up an ability here. Okay, so the 3rd boss is, I actually found this boss the hardest boss in this chapter. So I didn't really have any tricks for this boss. I was taking a lot of damage because I was trying to use my shield guard. As you can see, shield guard here actually pops them, but I had a lot of damage. So I remember I have rage here. As you can see, rage got rid of them really quickly. Your best bet is that you want to kill them as fast as you can. Watch your character, and when they start getting closer to you, move to the other side. But yeah, they're a bit tricky. They're not the easiest boss in my opinion. I think that's the hardest boss. So we have more ghost bombers. So as you can see, you see how I'm pausing in between? So now they're not firing anything, but once they start firing, I tend to just pause in between every shot. It makes it so much easier, and I always died because I couldn't, like I always died to them. They killed me the most in this chapter. They were just so hard to deal with everything going on. And we have more archers here. So remember, with the archers, you just want to pause until the red line is gone. As you can see, it's pretty hard because you're dealing with so many different projectiles. It really is a lot of eye coordination. I had to keep track of so many different things. The dodging here is much more prominent than chapters before, where it was much more shorter, but this one you have more prominent dodges. So as you can see, I'm pausing in between all the shots. So basically you want to pause, take a shot at them, pause, take some shots at them, and that's what it is. And then we have some more archers, some more trees, a lot of projectiles. Remember, watching your character makes it much easier in this case. We're already max level, nearly close to max level here. I had a lot of HP boost here, which was really nice as well. I think that scaled my rage really nicely. So I couldn't avoid all of them, unfortunately, but if I was quick enough, I would have been able to make it to the empty spot. Remember, you want to wait until the red line disappears and then move to the place. You have to kind of memorize the map and memorize where it was on the map that didn't really have any red lines. So it's much more clear, it's more safe for you to go there. I'm dealing a lot of damage because rage was very strong. I absolutely think that rage was a game changer. Then we have the skulls. The skulls are easy, especially if you have ricochet or diagonal arrows or bouncy wall. Honestly, they were very therapeutic to defeat in this chapter. Okay, now we have more of these red plants. There's a lot of them. They're firing everywhere. So as you can see, I'm watching my character here. This is why it helped me a lot to dodge them. I could react very quickly when I had those. Okay, the next one we have here is the bee. The bee actually was very easy. So what you want to do is you want to start a step to the left or to the right or up. Actually, no, left or right, yeah. You want to start a step left or right or diagonally because the bee shoots out those projectiles, as you can see. I didn't have to think about those projectiles. I just had to start a step in one direction and I automatically avoided them. That's pretty much all you want to do. And this does require abilities that will help you. So for example, ricochet really helps in this chapter. In this boss. But if you don't have it, you can still beat it. I've been in that boss many times without ricochet. It just is more challenging and a lot longer. But yeah, for that boss, you just want to start a step and you'll automatically avoid those projectiles. Now with this one, as you can see, I'm just watching my character. I'm not really doing anything else but watching my character. I'm not focusing on who I'm trying to kill. Because there's not really anyone that's hiding behind obstacles here. So it's very simple. But watching your character really helps in this chapter. Just gonna kill off the rest here. Because I'm focusing on watching my character so much, I'm not really killing them very fast. Because I'm pretty sure some of them were hiding behind obstacles that I couldn't reach them. But I'm slowly moving up because, as you can see, it's taken a very long time for me and it's getting safer. When it's safer, if you have a long map like that, it's safer to go up once there's less enemies. Just going to pick my ability here. I'm going to pick up Bloodthirst, and I found Bloodthirst really nice. Bloodthirst actually helped me reach the later stages because it was a little bit hard to reach the bosses in general because of the blue bombers. But if you're not having any trouble reaching the bosses, then Bloodthirst is not very needed. It's just there. It's just optional and situational depending on the circumstances. I don't think there are any more new monsters now. I think we're just getting to the last boss here. Just gotta reach the last boss, but the gameplay here should help you on how I dealt with all the shenanigans. But as you can see, I was pausing in between the bomb shots, which made it a lot easier. It's really nice because they do take quite of a break in between. So once they fire their 3 shots, or at least most bombers, once they fire their 3 shots, they take a break and then you can just kind of chill. And here we have the archers again. Remember, pause until the red line is gone and then move. And obviously they don't do it all at the same time, so you have to time everything. It's very, very hard, but it should flow out nicely. I felt like for me it flowed out nicely. I have beaten this chapter twice, so it's not all based on luck if you thought so for this run. I always like to make sure that I have my tips down, and I like to reapply them in another run to see how simple it is, if I can learn anything new. But that's what I found out so far for all the characters. And I feel like the wolves... So another thing I want to talk about is why you shouldn't pick Tornado here is, as you can see, there are a lot of wolves. They're very tanky. And these little darting blobs as well. Tornado doesn't have a pushback. And that makes it very hard for these runs. Like, it makes it super, super hard here, so I would try to avoid the tornado if you can. It's not impossible, but it is more challenging. Okay, so we're just more archers, just gonna avoid those, and the tree stump jumping trees. Don't really have any official names for these characters. Kind of just blabbing on now because I don't really have any more to say about them. We've got 49 here, so we're very, very close to the boss. Oh, a good tip is that on level 45, you might want to take the heal if you're very low. There is no chest on the end boss level. So the boss, I actually found very, very easy. As you can see, he dashes, he throws bombs, he also has a jump attack, but if you're actually not very far away from him, he won't jump. So what I tend to do is stay as close as you can to him, that's safe, and then just attack him. I would actually recommend to not attack him when he throws the bombs. I actually took hits when I did that. So I would just keep running when he throws the bombs until he dashes. When he dashes, he pauses for a second. When he pauses, attack him. So just run around. Bomb is a run, but dash is attack. Dash, attack. Dash, attack. And then he's going to keep dashing here. We're very lucky. If it's bombing, just keep running. Bomb, run. I didn't do it there. I did do another boss gameplay, and that pretty much is it. So as you can see, he's not that bad. Some people have said to just run around him and let your pets attack him. That's actually a lot longer. But yeah, that is it for the guide. However, I am going to, if you're still interested in more in-depth stuff about the bosses, you can keep watching until the very end here. But if you think you've got the general know-hows, then that's pretty much it. So I will be leaving some game clips of my second run of just the bosses, just so you can see how I beat them with the tips on the side. And yeah, but other than that, if you're not interested in that, I will say goodbye to you here. I thank you very much for watching. I hope this guide has helped you in some way. Feel free to leave any of your own tips down in the comments below. Any comments and likes would be super rad. Please do subscribe and click the bell if you're new here. It really helps me out. And I hope to see you again for the next video. Bye!